Broadcast every night is incredibly important.
If it's important to our nation,
I wonder how you think about where America is at this moment.
it's on Face the Nation.
Can there be stability if Vladimir Putin remains in power?
Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan on CBS.
Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us here for a special edition of CBS News. I'm Lana Zak in New York City.
And I'm Charlie D'Agata, live from Kyiv with a look at the Ukraine invasion 1 year in. It's been 12 months since Russia invaded Ukraine, beginning the long offensive. The U.S. and its allies have not only spoken out against Russian aggression, but they've also helped Ukraine fight back, trying to preserve its territory and democracy.
The United States and NATO allies have delivered money, equipment, and diplomatic support for Ukraine, but there is, at this point, no end in sight. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin has created his own narrative, blaming the West for the war, and has vowed that he will not stop until Ukraine is part of Russia. In this hour, Charlie and I will take a look back, but we will also look forward with stories of survival, stories of courage, and stories of a fight that will impact the stability of the world as we know it. Charlie?
Lana, President Biden made an unannounced visit to Kyiv this week and vowed his unconditional support. He then addressed the world from neighboring Poland and declared Ukraine will not be a victory for Russia. But at this point, there is no clear map to peace. Thousands have died in battle, millions are displaced, and once thriving cities have been reduced to rubble. But what has not been destroyed is the spirit and tenacity of the Ukrainian people. We've seen a former comedian take on the most serious threat of his life and emerge as a courageous leader. We've also seen people stand up against a global superpower more successfully than anyone had imagined. There have been some wins and tremendous losses. But as the fight continues, one of Russia's first targets of attack was Hostomel airfield. We spoke to a soldier who fought in that pivotal battle to defend Hostomel, which may have changed the course of the war. On the morning of the 24th, a few helicopters came in, more helicopters, you tell me.
Where you can see those trees, they landed there, and they approached from that direction towards us.
These are Russian paratroopers.
Exactly, they're elite troops. We had up to 200 men on our base and here in the airport, but mostly those were conscripts, some small amount of officers, and we're talking like financial officers and people who do all this stuff for the brigade.
This essentially handful of people that have never pulled a trigger in their lives are now facing elite Russian paratroopers.
I was really proud looking at my brothers, I can call them brothers, fighting so bravely. That was very inspiring. One of the moments was, when they started shooting at the helicopters.
And when you say shooting at these Russian helicopters, you're not talking about surface to air, you're talking about small arms fire.
That's the thing. One of the surprises that morning was that you can actually shoot down Russian Ka-52, that famous flying tank, using just concentrated fire from your rifles.
On a personal note, what was that like? You see all these Russian helicopters landing or trying to land, you're outnumbered and outgunned.
I've never seen them flying so close, actually, in my life. So it was an interesting experience, I would say.
Interesting, frightening.
Yes, it was amazing because the combat lasted for 2 hours.
2 hours?
Around 2 hours with this constant air support for Russians and prevailing number of Russian troops. And we didn't lose any man.
That seems like a miracle.
Yeah.
So it was their every intention to take this airstrip and take it quickly.
Exactly. Their idea was to take control over this airport and use it as an air bridge, basically to be able to deploy their mechanized brigade.
To capture Kyiv?
Yes.
At least for that time, your men were able to hold off the Russians. until reinforcements came in, essentially.
Yes. We had some of our soldiers captured. They were defending the radar that was quite far away from our main troops. We managed to exchange them, and when they returned home, they told us a lot of interesting things. First of all, when they were interrogated, they were asked, "Why did you shoot at us? We were trying to liberate you, you know?"
They genuinely asked that question, as if they were surprised.
Yeah.
You must have felt overwhelmed. The Russians were throwing some of their best equipment and personnel in a very concentrated area. Was there a time you thought, I'm not sure we're going to win this one?
There was no way for us to lose, because first of all, if we lose this war, Ukrainian nation is no more, because all this war is based on, hatred towards everything Ukrainian, hatred towards West, and all those values that we respect and appreciate. So if Russians win this war, we will be eliminated as Ukrainians.
Fighting for your existence.
We are fighting for our existence and for our future.
Now, Starsky told us that some of his soldiers are so green, the only experience they had was playing Call of Duty, yet they stood courageous and didn't lose a single man. Lana?
You know, it's really incredible, Charlie, that they have video game experience up against these elite Russian troops, but then it seems from the conversations that you've had that their secret superpower has been in many ways the fuel of their conviction.
Yeah, that's right. And, they had that sort of confidence to see how outnumbered they were and the fact that they were outgunned. And as you saw in that report, they were shooting down Russian helicopters. These aren't just any Russian forces. These are elite Russian paratroopers. And it was every indication that they needed that air bridge in Hostomel, which is only about a 20-minute drive outside of Kyiv. And had they been able to take that in any meaningful way, they would have been able to bring in all kinds of troops and equipment, artillery, air power, etc. And that's why it has been seen as a pivotal turning point, certainly when it comes to defending the capital itself. Lana?
Truly remarkable. Well, President Biden, as you know, is back in the U.S. following a 3-day trip to Eastern Europe. During his visit, the president made a surprise stop in Kyiv before traveling to speak with some of his NATO allies in Poland. CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Zhang joins us now. Weijia, thanks for being with us. So President Biden is obviously urging his NATO allies to provide more aid to Ukraine. How big of a role is the U.S. willing to play in the war?
Well, the president has said from day one that they will be standing next to Ukraine for as long as it takes, which is exactly the same message he reiterated when he visited Kyiv. So there really is no timestamp on that, but Republicans have made pretty clear that they're not, in their words, going to write a blank check. So it's one thing for the president to make these commitments, but of course he's not the one that, can sign off on this money. And there is fatigue here in Washington when it comes to Republicans for, spending billions and billions of dollars on this war. And so those are going to be some tough conversations coming up when it comes to, having to provide more money for Ukraine. But certainly if it were up to the president, he has made clear that he's going to give Ukraine whatever aid they need to continue in this war. The question, though, Lana, is not just what aid they can provide to sustain their current position. Ukraine wants more to win, to change their position from, maintaining what they are doing right now to ending the war by beating Russia. And that is why right now another conversation is those F-16 fighter jets that the Ukraine has long asked for, and the White House, the administration, has long said they will not be willing to provide. Of course, they have reversed their course before when it comes to decisions on what they will and will not give Ukraine. So that is another big question that we are tracking to see if that happens with those jets.
Weijia, as you mentioned, And we've spoken to defense ministers here and commanders on the ground. They are looking at those jets, and they've looked at weapon systems that have been delivered here, including HIMARS. But as we know, the U.S. is struggling to come to terms on its own government funding plan. How much more military aid can the Biden administration provide before the money runs out?
Well, you know, the president just announced another $500 million when he was in Ukraine. So, again, you know, the administration is not willing, has never been willing to say this is a cap. And we have asked many times whether there's a figure that they are willing to say publicly that, you know, that is the firm amount that we can supply, and when the money runs out, it runs out. But President Biden has said many times that this is not just about what's unfolding in Ukraine right now, that this is about setting precedent for how Western nations, how democracies deal with autocracies. And so, in the view of this White House, this investment is not just about Ukraine winning the war and beating Russia. This investment, in their view, is about, you know, sending a message to other would-be Putins, other would-be Russias, about what will happen if you try to dismantle a democracy and the leading role that the U.S. is willing to play. But again, you know, dollars matter when it comes to providing those checks, and we have yet to see what the Republican proposal is, if you're asking for a line by line. But certainly they've made clear, Charlie, that at some point they're not going to continue to pay for this war in Ukraine.
All right. Weijia Jiang for us at the White House. Thank you, Weijia.
Sure.
Well, back here in the U.S., more than 1 million people are in the dark as a powerful winter storm sweeps across the country. Still ahead, we'll look at the affected areas and show you where the storm is headed. But before we head to break, and throughout this show, we want to introduce you to some Ukrainians here in the U.S. who are sharing their personal stories.
I'm Antonina Skobina. I'm a Ukrainian American, originally born in Mariupol, Ukraine. When the war started a year ago, my grandparents and my mom were there, experiencing all the horrors and devastation of war. My grandfather died because of lack of medical help that he needed. Everything that I loved has been destroyed. When I was in Mariupol last time, the city was beautiful, peaceful, developing, happy. Now it's just ruins, full of death and despair.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's gonna be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today. I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm gonna remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was gonna be born, he was only gonna live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift, stream now on the free CBS News app.
You ready?
A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming racism.
I feel like it's just a war zone between all different races.
Will this generation continue the problem?
The kids pushed them away and didn't want them to be there because of their race.
Or be the solution?
We just need to keep raising our voices. We're all human and we don't deserve that type of treatment just because of how we look.
Are the kids all right? Racism, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
When weather turns extreme, CBS News and the Weather Channel bringing virtual weather technology so advanced, so real, you'll have time to get prepared. Feel the forecast. Weather when it matters most on CBS Mornings.
An original documentary from CBS Reports. Tensions rising between a powerful country and a vital island.
The supply of this technology came grinding to a halt. The world would grind to a halt.
Absolutely. As Taiwan faces threats and aggression.
Taiwan is on the front line, and we understand our responsibility as a democracy. We cannot fall.
CBS News examines whether they can defend themselves.
Putin, Ukraine, China, Taiwan, there are manifestations of the battle between autocracy and democracy. And that is a fight that we're all engaged in.
Defending Taiwan, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
The news doesn't have to always be depressing.
What do you love about running?
It can be uplifting. That human connection that we create on the broadcast every night is incredibly important.
Stories that inform.
You can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
In the Ohio train derailment, we now have preliminary findings from the National Transportation Safety Board. The agency says the train's engineer did not receive a safety warning until just before the crash. This morning, the NTSB released the report saying the engineer applied additional brakes to the train after a warning about an overheated axle. The report says the train's emergency brakes were also triggered. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg visited the site this morning and spoke with officials. They say the derailed cars were operating properly, but some were older models.
Compliance-wise, would there be anything we need to know from that about whether they were properly operated, or is our piece basically satisfied?
As far as we know, they were compliant. The legacy cars that are due to be phased out, those were the cars that failed.
The preliminary report does not offer a definitive cause for the crash. Well, 3 people are dead after a series of shootings in Central Florida yesterday. Among the victims are a local journalist and a 9-year-old girl. Police believe 19-year-old Keith Melvin Moses shot a woman to death inside her car and then came back later in the day and shot 2 journalists reporting on that initial shooting. He then walked up the street and shot the girl and her mother in their home. The suspect is already charged with first-degree murder of the victim. CBS News correspondent Manuel Bajorquez is there. Manny, you were just at the press conference. What more do we know now about these victims?
Well, the sheriff is meeting with local clergy here to discuss ways to combat this type of crime in this area, but really throughout the city and the state, really, when you're talking about mass shootings. Now, here's what we know that's new information from the sheriff about the victims. The youngest, a 9-year-old girl, Tiana Major, was shot in her home. Her mother, 38-year-old Natasha Augustin, was also shot. She remains in critical condition at the hospital. And then, of course, the news crew, identified by Spectrum 13 as Dylan Lyons, 24 years old, the reporter who is described as fun-loving, passionate about his job, who had such a long career ahead of him, and also the photojournalist Jesse Walden, who was shot and survived. I was watching Spectrum 13 earlier today, and the anchors were talking about Jesse, and they said that he was actually, after a surgery, able to call into the newsroom and tell them how he was doing, obviously still listed in critical condition, but with a long road of recovery ahead, but alive, and he wanted to thank the community for the outpouring of support since the shooting happened.
Manny, what have we learned about the suspect, and if he had a targeted reason for any of these shootings? Is there anything more about motive?
That remains, of course, the big question here. Why would he target the child, the mother in their home, or this news crew? That remains an unanswered question right now. We did get a sense from the sheriff last night at the news conference that the suspect was not saying much. We're still waiting to hear if he has any new information to provide on that matter today.
Manuel Bajorquez, thank you. Well, Alec Murdaugh is testifying in his own defense in his double murder trial, admitting he lied to investigators. The disbarred South Carolina attorney is accused of murdering his wife and son in June of 2021. Prosecutors allege he killed his family members in an effort to gain sympathy and distract from a slew of financial charges he faces in a separate case. Earlier, he denied killing his loved ones.
Mr. Griffin, I didn't shoot my wife or my son anytime. Ever.
On the stand, he admitted, though, that he lied to investigators about the last time he saw his wife and son on the night that they were murdered. Murdaugh claims he wasn't thinking clearly and his opioid addiction had made him paranoid. On the stand today, Murdaugh also became very emotional. He has pleaded not guilty to the charges. A new round of violence has broken out between Israelis and Palestinians in Gaza and southern Israel. Israeli military officials say Palestinian militants fired rockets from the Gaza Strip towards the southern part of the country early this morning. Israeli warplanes responded with strikes. This comes one day after a deadly Israeli raid in the West Bank. At least 10 Palestinians were killed and more than 100 injured. Around 1 million people are without power as a brutal winter storm batters the U.S. Dozens of states from coast to coast are on alert for blizzard conditions amid heavy snow and sharp winds. According to FlightAware, hundreds of flights in and out of the U.S. have already been canceled today. More than 1,700 were canceled yesterday amid the winter storms. Joining us now from Minneapolis is CBS News correspondent Christina Ruffini. Christina, parts of Minneapolis already received a foot of snow. How are the conditions now?
They're not great, but they're not terrible either. Look, it didn't quite get the deluge dumping of snow that they were predicting. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of snow on the ground, but they've been at work plowing nonstop. You could actually see them in our live shot earlier this morning pushing up snow. And we've been driving around on these roads, and while I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, they are passable. You know, I'm from Colorado. I've been on worse roads, and around here, folks have hunkered down. The mayor's asked everybody to stay off the streets, but some shops are still open. The coffee store around the corner is still open. I said, you guys are working today? And they said, yeah, anybody who can get here will serve. Cafe across the street is open. So it's quiet. It's difficult. There's a lot of snow. But so far, the power has stayed on around here, although a lot of people across the country have lost power. And it is the upper Northwest in winter. So, the upper Midwest in winter. So I think we're getting through it so far, but it is still coming down. We'll have to see what tonight brings.
I love that spirit, that Midwest spirit that's not afraid of snow. But wondering, as this becomes more intense, how are officials responding as the storm enters its second day?
Well, they're responding cautiously. You don't want to be caught off guard, especially with a storm of this size. And we've seen how many states have been impacted. There have been highways that have been shut down from Wyoming to Wisconsin just because of low visibility overnight. They've declared a snow emergency around here. That means no one's allowed to park on any of these side streets because they want to be able to get the plows in there and get this snow out of the downtown. And they've done something interesting. They've opened up a bunch of free parking lots around the city, and they're asking folks who usually park on the street to take their cars and move them to those lots so that they're safe, they're out of the way, they're making them free, and they're just trying to keep it clear and keep it moving so that the city can get back on its feet as quickly as possible. It's very, very frozen feet, but get back on them nonetheless.
Frozen feet, but it doesn't seem to be bothering those pups out there. All right, Christina, stay warm, and thank you.
Will do. Thanks.
Well, those storms are expected to hit parts of the Northeast as we head towards the weekend. Meteorologist Alex Wallace from our partners at the Weather Channel has the forecast for us. Good day, Alex.
Well, good day to you, Alana. As we progress on through this week, we've been, of course, dealing with our coast-to-coast system, which has had a big impact here from coast to coast. Now the Northeast feeling some of the impacts here. Still some snow and some ice to contend with as we progress through the day. Kind of another batch of this precip that's going to swing on through as we head on through our Thursday. Things will start to calm down, though, during the overnight hours, and then certainly as we progress into our Friday, much less shower activity. The snow starts to dwindle as well. But not before we see it adding up. Looks like another 3 to 5 here for us across central parts of Maine. There could be even a spot or two there just north and east of Bangor that picks up 5 to 8 inches of snow. Otherwise, back closer towards the lakes, less than an inch is generally what we'll find. But there's going to be a zone of ice that we are watching for through our early part of Friday from essentially the eastern sections of the lakes, working over towards even the Boston metro, where there could be some ice that totals anywhere from 1/10 of an inch to a 1/4 of an inch, which could certainly impact those who may be traveling. On the other side of things, how warm things will be in a good chunk of the east. How about 165 million above average in the east, while the cold is impacting us in the western part of the country. And that split will continue for some time. You got temps near 80 in the southeast, and we've got numbers that are barely getting out of the single digits, if not at all, in parts of the northern plains and Rockies. Big split across the country. Of course, remember, you can watch the Weather Channel on cable and now live on your favorite TV streaming device. We'll send it back to you.
All right, Alex, thank you. Well, coming up, our special continues. A Ukrainian lawmaker's desperate plea for help went viral. 1 year later, Charlie catches up with her to see what she thinks about the war and where it stands right now, and what Ukraine needs to defeat Russia. And before we go, here's another story from a Ukrainian working in New York City. He's struggling to keep his family together while they're living on opposite sides of the world.
My name is Vitaly. I'm 31 years old, and I've been living in the US for about a decade. My life has changed a lot in the past year. 3 months ago, I was lucky enough to bring my mom here as a Ukrainian refugee. It hasn't been easy for her, and she's still adjusting to that. At the same time, my dad is stuck in Ukraine, as a man of a certain age cannot leave the country just in case they get drafted. My family is split throughout the globe, and I will try to continue to do my best to help them and my country. I hope for a clear sky and peace in Ukraine very soon.
An original CBS Reports documentary.
Yoga and wellness has become a place of anti-science.
Online clickbait.
The algorithms feed you content based upon your own fantasy.
Potentially at my peril.
There's no question about it.
Spreading digital disinformation.
Their entire yoga studio and spiritual community got so embedded in all of the QAnon stuff that it became this sick place.
Why pro-health people are fertile ground for anti-science messages.
We can just go into the whole mask thing. A lot of us just believe that's symbolism for silencing people.
People are locked in this mindset. They've been taught to accept what the medical doctors say.
No longer are you going to be willing to take any medical advice.
It's a big problem that we urgently need to address.
An original CBS Reports documentary streaming now. An original CBS Reports documentary.
We need to put an end to this territorial status.
Will statehood create a better Puerto Rico?
So that we have the same quality of life that you see in the States.
What do you worry about?
Me living here in the future?
They're giving incentives to non-Puerto Ricans to come to Puerto Rico
and extract our natural resources and take over our land.
Vacation in Puerto Rico, and in exchange for that, you don't pay taxes.
Why would I allow somebody who abused me for 123 years to then consume me?
An original CBS Reports documentary streaming now. People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
After decades in the public eye and public service, this mother-daughter duo is now talking about gutsy women. What's the gutsiest thing you've ever done? We go person to person with Secretary Hillary Rodham Clinton and Chelsea Clinton.
Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to CBS News. I'm Charlie Daggett in Kyiv.
And I'm Lana Zak in New York City. People around the world are marking 1 year since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Allies, including the United States, have rallied behind Ukraine, providing funding, supplies, and military training. Earlier this week, President Biden gave a forceful speech reiterating his support just a day after making an unannounced visit to Kyiv. The Biden administration has said it will support Ukraine for as long as it takes.
Not long after Russia began its unprovoked invasion of Ukraine last year, CBS News spoke with Ukrainian lawmaker Halina Yanchenko. She criticized slow-moving sanctions against Russia and gave this emotional plea.
Please save Ukrainian men, women, and children.
Halina, I can hear it in your voice. I mean, this is a...
Citizens. Block Russia from SWIFT. I beg you,
Helena, a member of Ukraine's parliament, joins us now. Helena, I want to start by asking you, how important was President Biden's visit to Ukraine, to the Ukrainian government, to the Ukrainian people?
Well, hi. It was a very important sign of support for Ukrainian people, but in my opinion, it was also a very important sign that Joe Biden have sent to Russia, Iran, and China, as we see that totalitarian regimes, undemocratic countries, they start uniting to strengthen each other and to help each other. We already see that Iran is providing some military assistance to Russia, and we see some signs that China is about to start supplying Russia with weapons. So it's very important to actually send this strong message from US to these undemocratic countries that this is not tolerated and democracy should win. So in my opinion, this visit of Joe Biden made him look stronger as a global leader.
You mentioned China there. We've watched with concern these developments. How much of a concern is that to the Ukrainian government?
Well, this is, we are deeply concerned, so to say, because actually it will be much more difficult to continue this fight, because China has a big potential in terms of technologies, in terms of weapon delivery. Currently, in my opinion, it's very important for US and also for European Union to intensify military assistance to Ukraine. We have brave people, we have very motivated soldiers, but we need a big number of heavy weapons so they can make this breakthrough on the front line and we all can speed up the Ukrainian victory. Ukrainian victory is an only way to finish this war.
People ask me all the time because of how long I've been reporting on this, but let me ask you, what do you think the people of Ukraine are concerned about, preparing for in the weeks and months ahead?
Well, everyone is concerned about their lives, to tell the truth, because it's already almost a year since the invasion. And actually, we Ukrainians, we learned not to be afraid of death because we don't control it anymore. Russian missile can hit your house at night while you're sleeping in your bed, hugging your child or doing stuff that you normally do. So this is a very bloody and cruel war, and a lot of civilians, a lot of children are suffering it. A lot of Ukrainian families are separating. So it's very important to provide enough of military support to Ukraine so we can finish this war, we can get the victory, and families will be reunited.
Helena, thank you. Thank you for speaking with us.
Well, the Ukrainian people have relentlessly been fending off Russian forces for the past year. The UK's defense secretary estimates Russia has deployed 97% of its ground forces there in Ukraine. Earlier, CBS News foreign policy and national security contributor H.R. McMaster discussed where the conflict stands and where President Putin and his generals went wrong.
I think the military, like all institutions in Russia, is suffering from corruption. I mean, the military as an institution was hollowed out like other Russian institutions under Putin, who really runs a kind of a criminalized patronage network across all these departments and agencies.
Well, we want to show you how this war has played out over the past year. Just a few days after the invasion began, Russia was fast making territorial gains. As you can see on this map, Ukrainian-controlled territory is in red, Russian-controlled territory is in yellow. Russia launched a barrage of airstrikes at different Ukrainian cities, including the capital of Kyiv. And Russia took over the area north of the capital, including the Chernobyl nuclear plant, which raised, of course, international concerns. Then 2 weeks into the conflict, Russia gained more territory in the north, east, and south, including annexing the southern city of Kherson, the first major city in Ukraine to fall. And fears then began over a possible nuclear accident, reignited after Russian forces started shelling the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant, which is the largest in Europe. Then, by April, Ukraine gained back a significant amount of the territory in the north, but Russia solidified its control in the Donbas region. During this month, the world learned of the horrors at Bucha. It's a town where Russian military committed atrocities and alleged war crimes against the civilian population during their occupation. Now that brings us to the last big shift in control. Just this past November, when Ukrainian forces took back Kherson and a significant portion of the east. During that month, 2 Polish civilians were killed by an explosion in the Poland-Ukrainian border. That prompted, of course, concerns over a possible escalation of the conflict to include NATO. U.S. intelligence officials ultimately concluded that that explosion was caused by Ukrainian air defense missiles intercepting a Russian bombardment. Well, territory has not shifted much during these past few winter months. Russia remains in control of large swaths of the Donbass. Ukraine has retaken territory in the north, and some southern areas, including Snake Island, made headlines for their defiant last stand by Ukrainian soldiers there. Overall, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky maintains that his nation's goal is to retake all occupied land, including Crimea, which was annexed by Russia in 2014. Now, Ukraine's defense minister says that the country must keep fighting off Russia. He sits down with Charlie to explain why that's so important. But ahead of the break, we want to introduce you to the owner of a Ukrainian restaurant here in New York City. He's been working over the last year to sponsor as many refugees from his war-torn country as possible.
My name is Jason Burchard. I'm the 3rd-generation proprietor of Vysoka restaurant here in New York City. My grandfather, Volodymyr Domarchwal, a Ukrainian immigrant escaping Russian oppression, started this business 69 years ago. If he were alive today, he would go and fight. His spirit lives in me, and I'm doing the best I can from afar. I have saved 10 Ukrainian refugees through the Stand With Ukraine program, and they are now working with other family members in my business. I will continue to support my fellow countrymen in Ukraine. Slava Ukraine.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
The first U2 show really was on this outside here.
Oh, right there.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Nora O'Donnell, and we go person to person with Bono.
Community is at the very heart of U2's music. There was magic, you know, that's all we had.
Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
If it's important to our nation.
Madam Speaker, I want to talk to you, of course, about abortion.
It's on Face the Nation.
How much money is it that you think you need to go ask Congress for?
The why behind the biggest stories.
Can there be stability if Vladimir Putin remains in power?
Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan on CBS.
An original documentary from CBS reports. As the nation of Hungary evolves toward autocracy,
if you define an autocrat as someone that the people can no longer get rid of, even when there are elections, he's definitely an autocrat.
Some American conservatives like what they see.
Viktor Orban has done a tremendous job, and you've kept your country safe.
CBS Reports explores their growing alliance.
I have come to Texas. We should unite our forces.
So there are a ton of booths here, a lot of young people here.
And what it means for American democracy.
Prime Minister Orban is being accused of all kinds of things simply because he doesn't toe that liberal line. He stands for Christian conservative values.
To sum up, the mother is a woman, the father is a man, and leave our kids alone. Full stop, end of discussion.
A new conservative alliance, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
When weather turns extreme.
The threat of severe weather and dangerous tornadoes is expected to last.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bringing virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
Let's bring in our partners at the Weather Channel.
Now 6 feet of water, imagine that. Cars that can act like battery lamps.
These hyper-realistic simulations show you what the weather will look and feel like before it happens.
Feel the forecast, streaming on CBS News.
We're
really excited that we've been honored with the Emmy Award for Outstanding Live News Program. But we know we couldn't have done that without you. So thank you. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7 on CBS.
The news doesn't have to always be depressing.
What do you love about running?
It can be uplifting. That human connection that we create on the broadcast every night is incredibly important.
Soldiers in Ukraine are not backing down, even as Russia seems to be mounting a new offensive.
And that includes Americans like Sarah Ashton Cirillo. She enlisted in Ukraine's armed forces as a combat medic after witnessing the Kyiv missile strikes in October last year. She spoke with CBS News from the front lines.
The military just carries out the will of the Ukrainian people. That's what we're here for. And I personally am able to move forward and carry on. And one of the reasons I enlisted is because nothing has ever been stronger in the fight for liberty, liberation, and democracy than what the Ukrainian people are doing, at least since the United States Revolution against the British Empire.
While the war rages on, Ukrainian military officials are focused on protecting their homeland and driving all Russian forces from their country. I sat down with Ukrainian Defense Minister Alexei Reznikov to talk about how they're fighting back and what they need to win. Do you believe that the Russians are still intent on trying to capture Kyiv?
It's a nightmare or crazy idea in the Kremlin, because who control capital, control country. But on this moment, I cannot to see the reality of this plan, because you know that Kyiv is a city with 4 million of population. It's a lot of people. How to occupy
How do you
that?
take a place like that?
It's impossible.
What is causing you the most concern now? Where are the flashpoints?
We see that they have 2 places of concentration of their armed forces in the east, especially in the Bakhmut direction and Kupiansk, and also in the south, closely to the Zaporizhia direction.
Will the tanks get here in time? The Russians seem to be pushing right now.
If we are talking about their offensive, not. Because we need time for our tank cruisers to be prepared with the training courses.
Which has been the most critical weapon on the battlefield so far for you?
Artillery.
Artillery.
Artillery still, because it's a war, so you will not have enough, and we need ammunition. The second priority is air defense systems, sure, but we need more to cover the sky, not only in Kyiv, but in Odessa, in Kharkiv, in Dnipro, in Lviv, the biggest cities in Ukraine.
There are people in the United States who are saying this is a lot of money. Are we just lengthening this war? Your argument to them and to anybody who might be saying, we've got to stop doing this. This is just escalating it and prolonging the war.
We can finish this war in Ukraine. We cannot to allow Russians to be in the Baltic countries or in the Poland, because it's NATO countries. And we can reduce the power of Russians in the battlefield in Ukraine. It means that it will give the NATO countries the chance to live in peace.
We keep worrying about escalating in Putin. We figure at what point is he going to say, I'm not going to stand this. It is a dangerous thing to humiliate President Putin on the battlefield.
Every time when I hear the next step of or level of escalation, I ask my counterparts, what the next level you want? They killed our civilians, our children, they ruined our infrastructure, they killed people in Dnipro using the missile against the air carrier ship. You saw the massive graves in Bucha, in Hostomel, in Kupiansk or Balaklia. What next level of escalation should be?
Powerful words from the defense minister, and candid. He was very open to us, and you heard what he said. They need artillery, they need ammunition, and they need it now. Lana?
On that line, Charlie, your question about lengthening the war, was there a sense from him that the U.S. needed to do more to help Ukraine end the war on their terms?
Well, ending the war, people ask me all the time, I ask others here in Ukraine, when does this come to an end? And really the better question is, how does it come to an end? We are here at a stalemate in terms of President Putin saying that Russia will not be defeated, the Ukrainians saying that they will not quit until all of Ukraine is taken over, including Crimea. Well, that puts us at a difficult and dangerous situation where the weapons will be coming in from the United States and allies. There will be more troops and equipment flowing in from Russia. And as it gets warmer here in the spring, they will be fighting along that front line in the east, as you heard Mr. Reznikov say, along Kupiansk, where we went to, where they're already fighting, in Kherson and Zaporizhia. We know these places now because there have been so many bombardments going on there and military aggressions on both sides. It hasn't moved in many places more than 400 or 500 yards a day. Bakhmut, as we know, is just getting pummeled. But this is what we're going to be looking at. It is grinding. And when those tanks get here, that will change the battlefield significantly. But that doesn't mean it's going to be a decisive change on the battlefield. So there's no knowing where this is going to go, except the longer it goes on, the more people are going to suffer.
Yeah, and it's already been a year. I remember, Charlie, us having conversations at the very beginning of Russia's invasion. How different the country looks now. I'm struck in seeing these images and remembering what the country looked like at the very beginning of this war, right before the war. You've been there so frequently during the course of this 1 year. How have you seen the country change, and what stayed the same?
Well, Lana, I remember when you and I were talking in the first few hours of the invasion, and there were thousands of people who were rushing to the train station trying to get out of here. We have to remember 18 million people have been displaced. A lot of them have come back. But at the time, we looked at Kyiv as if it was going to fall within 96 hours, the entire country within a number of weeks. And there was a real panic on the ground. Out here in Kyiv, you may be able to hear some of the traffic going by. Shops are open. Some of the restaurants are open. Some of the hotels are open. At the time, there was this great mass exodus. So along certain areas where missiles are still falling, we had an air raid siren this morning, something that was intercepted out of the sky. We're certainly worried about the next 24 hours in case Russia wants to mark this invasion or the 1-year anniversary of the invasion in any meaningful, significant way. But as you get a little bit closer to places like Kharkiv out in the east and Kupiansk, where we've been, Kherson, which is supposedly under, Ukrainian control, it's still getting whacked. And the reason it's getting hit is because it's still within range, not just of Russian rockets and cruise missiles that can hit anywhere in the country, but Russian artillery. And that is where, when we talk to local commanders, they say we need the artillery, we need the ammunition to push everybody back. So yes, at the time, a year ago today, the entire country looked like a war zone, and it is in a way, but in terms of the fighting itself, the Ukrainians have been capable of pushing the Russians outside of Kyiv and away from Kyiv, so the capital was no longer under threat. That doesn't mean that fight is over, but it has largely been contained to the east around the Donbass region. That's where the intensity continues, but nobody is expecting this is going to be over soon. And, I spoke to Mayor Klitschko, and he said Kyiv itself is within the sights of President Putin. He wants to take over the country, and he's not going to quit. Yeah. Lana?
All right, Charlie D'Agata, thank you. Well, we still have more news headlines from across the country, including grocery prices that are skyrocketing. Coming up, find out how one New York-based market is keeping costs from getting too high. And as you've seen throughout this special, many people, not just those living in Ukraine, are affected by the war there. Before the break, we want you to hear from a military expert here at home who says Americans need to pay very close attention to this war.
I'm Brigadier General, retired Peter Swag, and I have a long history with Russia. We are now in a dangerous space. We are supporting a free-minded nation, Ukraine, with Europe and many other nations in the world, and drawing a line against vicious Russian aggression. It's dangerous in a way that hasn't been dangerous since the era of the Cuban Missile Crisis. We need to be firm, we need to be smart, we need to work with our allies, and enable the Ukrainians to fight for their survival.
When weather turns extreme,
States from the plains to the northeast are bracing for more than 2 feet of heavy snow.
every second counts.
This is a monster winter storm.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
There's a wrinkle in the forecast, the accumulating ice.
You'll have time to get prepared.
Take precautions before you head out.
Feel the forecast on the CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy. And reach for the stars.
Here we are. Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun.
But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking,
I'm open to the idea of being a human being.
innovative, and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
My name is Nora. How are you doing?
We go to stories. We travel there because we can bring someone to that story.
You have spinal issues and you can hit the ball that far.
It feels so good.
That's so incredible. Tell me, what do you love about running?
Energy!
The news doesn't have to always be depressing. It can be uplifting. That human connection that we create on the broadcast every night is incredibly important.
You ready?
A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are. Technology is baked into the DNA of our generation.
Now streaming Chasing Fame.
I like being famous. I would love for my career to launch.
Is the hunt for social media popularity an opportunity?
To get verified is one of my big goals. If I get the blue check mark, it would open a lot of doors.
Or an obsession?
I spend a lot of time looking in the mirror because I want to look perfect.
Are the kids all right? Chasing Fame, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We're really excited that we've been honored with the Emmy Award for Outstanding Live News Program. But we know we couldn't have done that without you. So thank you. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7 on CBS.
Inflation remains stubbornly high here in the U.S. For many of us, that becomes most apparent during trips to the grocery store. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, prices for food bought to be prepared at home rose 11.3% compared to 1 year ago. That's almost double the overall inflation number of 6.4%. Joining us now is Aziz Osmani. He is the co-owner and head purchaser for Kalustyan's, a spice and imported goods market located in New York. Thank you for being here. So according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, grocery prices increased almost 10% in the New York, New Jersey city area last month compared to a year ago. How has that spike impacted your prices?
Well, it is very challenging. The price has gone up, as all of you know, in every sector. So especially for the supply chain problem, grocery price has gone up tremendously.
Yeah, well, what are you doing then to keep prices down for your customers?
Well, one of the things is that our profit margin has gone down because there is so much you can raise. You can raise, sometimes we don't feel comfortable raise the pricing ourselves. Said this, let's say you're selling something for $8. Now you need to raise it to $10. Sometimes we cannot raise to $10. We still need to keep that to $8. So sometimes we have to absorb ourselves. And sometimes if there is no room at all, then there's no choice. You need to raise the price. And on the other hand, we try to get things in bulk, so that instead of buying cases at a time, you buy a pallet at a time. So you try to save some money in purchasing. So that is another way of doing it, but not everybody can do that. So we do have a warehouse that we can keep product in stock. So that's how we try to keep the cost down on that in that area.
Well, it's interesting to talk to you because you represent a person who's stuck between the customers who are complaining about high prices and the inflationary trends that, as you say, you're absorbing in many cases. According to Lending Club, nearly 2 out of every 3 consumers in the U.S. were living paycheck to paycheck as of December. What advice do you have for other stores that are struggling to keep food prices affordable for their customers? And how long do you think your business will be able to absorb these additional costs?
I mean, we can only absorb so much, but there is there's a certain point that you cannot absorb anymore. So you need to raise. So we try our best to cost down by purchasing things in bulk so that at least you save some money in buying.
Yeah. Aziz Osmani, thank you for showing us your part in this puzzle that we're all struggling with. Well, coming up in our next hour, Ukraine has been under siege from Russia for the past year, but global allies are coming to the country's aid. We have special coverage of where the war currently stands and what's next. Plus, Alec Murdaugh is taking the stand to defend himself in his double murder trial. We will bring you the latest from the courtroom. And then later, millions of Americans are dealing with harsh winter weather. We've got a look from the ground as snow continues to pile up. We're streaming CBS News.
You ready?
A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming Gender.